Hey everyone, Tactics here with my second last 0.1% root walkthrough here for Season 3 of Dragonflight, where this time we're going to be looking at a plus 26 Tyrannical Throne of the Tides key. Going to go over the root we used here, some potential root variations depending on the affixes that week, as well as other easy to miss tricks and just tech that can help you complete this key and push for that 0.1% title. Reminder, I do have videos just like this one out for most of the other Season 3 dungeons already on my channel, and I'll be making similar videos for Season 4 of Dragonflight and beyond into the War Within as well, so be sure you are subscribed to the channel so you know when those get posted. Plus, don't forget to stop by my Twitch stream at Tactics, where you can catch me pushing keys live. Otherwise, let's get into the key itself, where there's basically two main strategies here. You are basically just choosing what you want to skip. So some people opt to skip the first two packs of the dungeon here. So I'll just play. We're not going to skip them. We're actually going to play them. But basically, you would skip these two invaders, and you would skip the patrolling snapdragons and the man with them. And what you would do is you would invis off the top to about here. You'd wait for this pat to start moving back this way, and then you would pull this pack on top of this one, and a lot of people actually pull that on top of the Ravager. So that's basically to get big Ravager Bloodlust value. Common on Tyrannical, because that is a scary fortified pull, but we are opting to do the more fortified ish route, where we're going to actually skip some of the Gill Goblins later on in the dungeon. So we're playing all the way up to this area, essentially to the whole first hallway, grabbing the Oracle, keeping it moving. On a fortified week, if you do this pull, what usually would happen is you would actually hard CC this Oracle here, like with a sap or a polymorph, anything you have, and you would then do the whole pull, like around where I am right now, just minus this one Oracle, and then you would pull this Oracle into the next pull, just because you're going to see on a Tyrant week, like there's a lot of kicks, right? There's 3 spam kick mobs. It's hard to keep track of them all. And there's Sanguine here. So Sanguine's going to go a little weird on this pull for us. But you can just separate that on fortified weeks. So you only have 2 casters to deal with in this pull, much less dangerous. Whereas, you know, on Tyrant, it's not a big deal. You can see we dropped the barrier there, and we're watching the people who are targeted by that the big guy here, and of course all our prio damage is going into that sentinel as well, just to make sure he doesn't get too many casts off, because he is still quite dangerous. In terms of kicks, I'm basically soloing one of the oracles, and we're putting all of our other kicks into the other one. We use stops there on the heals, and then we're just kind of chaining, you know, single target stuns on the third one. We're gonna run out of kicks on that third one, right? Which is not a huge deal on Tyrant, though potentially if we got to a couple Tyrant keys higher, we'd want to CC that Oracle as well. But in general, I do recommend trying to CC one of the Oracles just so you don't have to deal with this. But overall, not too much Sanguine healing. I'll say that, and it's going to skyrocket here, and then we just go straight into the Ravager. Again, we don't get the lust value, the CD value on the Ravager, unfortunately, though to be fair, our comp has damage like very, very often. We're not a 2-minute comp, so it's not a huge deal. But a lot of groups do like to try and get your Bloodlust on this Ravager, because it's quite scary. Also, notably, once you get into the higher fortified keys, the frontal on this mob will like near one-shot people. You see, it's not too scary now, but it'll do like 80-90% of a player's health on like a 27-28 fort. And so you need to be very, very careful, make sure you're spread out, and sometimes even people LOS the frontal as well, by using this wall, and you just kind of dip around the wall over here every time the frontal goes out, just to make sure you move away from the LOS spot for when these green circles come out, and then you move back to it for the actual acid barrage portion of it. But you can do that on higher fort keys. Moving upstairs, this is also a pull that's going to vary from Tyrant to fort. So on Tyrant, we're not really scared here. So you see, we're going to walk in, we're going to pull everything. On fort, you are very scared here, because these drudges actually clap. They hit very hard. So what you're going to want to do probably is just not pull these sentinels in yet on a fort key. You want to do this pack until all the drudges are dead. Once the drudges are dead, then you chain in these sentinels. And for our comp, again, we would prio down one of the sentinels and then chain the second sentinel, which is going to be the only thing left alive, into the 3-pack up here. But obviously on the Tyrant week, we're just going to pull them all. So we're going now. We're going big everything again. Oracle, I tend to be solo kicking an Oracle. And then the Witch is going to be dealt with. Again, can be soloed by a lot of specs. Actually, like our Evoker can solo one of the Witches on his own because they do not actually spam cast. So there's delays in their cast sometimes depending on their this spell they throw, that kind of thing. You're actually going to see here a lot of specs can solo a Witch on their own using stops, using their interrupts. And so that leaves me open to solo the spam caster in the Oracle. Again, it doesn't look too scary here. We do have like scales running. We apply, externals and big healing to the 2 debuff players. You can immune it, I believe, as well. Pre-immuning potentially works. I believe it does. Like if I could pre-spell warding a target and they would actually have the debuff fizzle, I believe. If you do it after the fact, obviously doesn't remove it, but something you can do. But we got pretty lucky with targeting here, I think, because our mage is a pretty good target, and then we kill up there. So we only got 3 total casts off on a Tyrant week. On a fort, obviously, it would probably be more than that, but we definitely stagger the pulling because you want to, like, on fort, super scary, right? Like, you need to be hard committing defensives if you get that debuff, and using one of like the toxic health pots are pretty big for that, and massively eats into that shield. Any other kind of externals or defensives. Just to help deal with that. And then we get into this pull. So you can see here, we're actually going to double pull here and we'll pull it back out of the room because we don't want the Ravager. So what you see here is to make grouping a little easier and to make it so I'm not getting spam casted on while I'm grouping initially, is we CC both Witches in this first pack. And I'm going to walk in, I'm going to kick the Oracle in, and now I'm going to aggro both of them and run around this corner, right? So that basically meant instead of me eating 1 to 2 casts from those Witches as I'm going in to group the packs, I eat 0, which is very, very good. I'm now around the corner. Again, we get our marks out. I'm solo kicking the actual Oracle in this area. And then we're going to try and use things like AoE stops and stuff to prevent the Witch damage. But again, Tyrant's not the biggest deal. We kind of just throw a barrier for this pack, though. Yeah, it's probably better if we had saved barrier, I think, for the dog pack. But in general, look, a lot of the lightning bolts are just not really going off here because, it's, like I said, like a lot of specs can actually solo their own Witch. This Witch kind of got caught in the corner here, so it wasn't quite in the pack getting AoE down. But we're going to add it now, back in, finish it off. And now this lets us have some pretty nice pulls in this area, which we do need to actually pull everything because, like I said, we are planning to skip later on. So everything in here must go. And so the plan basically is I'm going to pull one of this pack back. We're going to get kicks on it. Bring them all back so we don't pull these Snapdragons. And again, it's going to be me on an Oracle. We're going to have the 2 other people on the other Oracle, and then 1 person kind of trying to solo the Witch with like knockups and stuff like that, their own interrupts, that kind of thing. Occasionally the Witch will go off, but it's not the end of the world. And then we bring the Ravager in for our prio target for our comp. Again, very, very nice to have a prio target for the Fire Mage Outlaw comp. I think, was this an AoE going out here with some kicks maybe? Let's see. Oh yeah, so that's a stray lightning bolt off. And see, so we were just sitting on kicks there. We need to make sure we actually got that off. So that's why that happened. It was AoE into a kick going off. So be careful. Very, very dangerous, especially on fort weeks. And just finishing off this Ravager before we go into this the last remaining side. And again, it's the same deal in terms of how we're managing the kicks on these Oracles. I'm gonna solo 1. I'm gonna get as many as I can. These are targeting me, so it's not a big deal. They come in, boom, and these guys can be super scary, right? So you can see I bubbled already. So I got 8 stacks or something insta. And so I'm going to like, okay, that's a pretty decent bubble. 6 stacks. Yeah. And then I'll bubble here, went up to 8. Boom. I'm going to be bubble taunted. I still have my dwarf available. We still have an Evoker Bleed Cleanse. You can see we're not playing too far away from the pack here because these Snapdragons do immediately jump to their target, which is a little spooky. Some things you can do though, I believe you can slow in advance, and while they'll still instantly jump to you, you can, start running away and they'll be a little slower. Obviously, stuns on them can be good if you have an AoE stun. If you have like a Ring of Peace, monks are really, really good for this pack because they have 2 of those tools, which is really, really nice, of course. Same with druids who have Ursuls. Obviously, we have none of those, so we're kind of using the few knockbacks we have. Frost Nova occasionally we use. I don't know if we use it here, but by staying relatively close to the pack, we can kind of like chain our CCs down here and just kind of cleave them down because they don't jump out super far. I think our rogue also potentially commits evasion there because he gets a couple on him, but basically you want to avoid having like your melee here and your range like at max range, because it's just going to massively split up the pack, which is going to hurt the amount of time it takes to kill this pack, right? Which is just makes it more and more dangerous. But basically doing that, this pack again, nothing really to talk about here. Pretty simple pack. Then we get to Lady. Okay, so this is definitely a boss which has a little trick to it, which I'm sure some of you have already heard by now. But basically, it's to deal with the Tempest. So we have a marker down here, which is where one of our players are going to be standing, and we kind of go off that direction. So basically, I think it's our healer is going to be here, our rogue, our mage, and our evoker at the back, and I'm going to be directly in the center. And the goal here is to always have the tank be the second or the closest person to you, rather, because Focus Tempest targets a random non-tank player with each tick. So boom, that's the first tick. It targets the priest, and then it jumps to the closest player from them. The key is this will never target the same player twice. The only ever time it'll hit a player twice is if that player gets hit by another player's Focus Tempest hit. So this one goes off the priest, and you can't even tell I got hit because my health didn't move, but I was the closest person to the priest, so I got hit by the second hit. Next tick, boom, the evoker. Again, I got hit by the second tick, but it looks like it's only hitting one person right now because I'm in Sentinel and I'm taking no damage, and I'm in my Consecrate. But basically, if our priest had been positioned over here, he would have taken another tick of damage there because he would have been the closest player to the evoker. So basically, you want to play in such a way that the closest person to each player is the tank, and that way these 3 ticks of Focus Tempest that happen during every cast don't actually ever double hit anyone. Because again, you can be picked only once by the initial hit per channel, and there's 3 hits per channel, so you're never gonna get never gonna pick evoker and then evoker again, right? So you're safe if you've been picked once, assuming you are not the closest person to anyone else. So keep that in mind. That also kind of opens you up to commit some bigger personals to this. So on higher Tyrants, like I think on like a 28 Tyrant, we needed light cooldowns to actually live some of the Focus Tempest cast for the priest and the evoker. So he would kind of use scales and mass barrier, and we would chain those things to deal with Focus Tempest. And then if it ever picked the evoker, if it ever picked the priest, we would have paladin externals or pain suppression to help them in that situation for the actual AoE here. The mage and the rogue are always fine. OP classes, super tanky. But that's how we would deal with that, and especially on a higher Tyrant key, how you would live this as the squishier class. That's the main trick, really. The only other thing is to, I guess, not be near the big ad spawn when he comes out. These spawns are static. I believe it's always going to be directly across from the X marker here. Yeah, don't ever be near this guy because he will just swing very early on. And so if you're not the tank and you're standing near a spawn, there's a good chance you're dead. Once these witches actually do have aggro on the tank, they're only going to spam cast Frostbolt at the tank. It's not really a huge deal if you miss some casts. It's not, you don't want to miss too many casts because the slow can be a little spooky here, but it's not really a ton of damage. You can see there, it's like, what, 20% of my HP maybe? It's not a huge deal. Just, interrupt it if you can, though. Got spare interrupts for a reason. Here, you want to quickly, after every phase, get back into position, though, because Focus Tempest happens super quick. So that's why we are, want to get quickly. And you can see it's quite scary. That was with the Volcanic, too. But as a Priest and Evoker, this is definitely a much scarier boss fight than a Rogue and a Mage. And we do rip Bloodlust on CD here. So wherever you get it, we do rip it immediately. Of course, it was on that first pull because we want to fit 4 Bloodlusts into this dungeon, and you don't have a lot of leeway. And the real thing on Tyrannical is you want Bloodlust for the 3rd boss on pull, because that is the scariest boss phase of any boss in this dungeon. And so to actually time it to be on pull, you need to rip your 2nd lust relatively quickly. Like there's maybe an argument to like do it here, but then you'd have 10 minutes basically until your next until you get it back, and then you wouldn't have a lot of leeway for your 4th lust either, right? So it's kind of a balancing game here. You really want to rip that. It's that 2nd lust that's not too big a deal, because again, this boss actually is not too scary for a lot of comps. Now, let's talk about the bubbles. So the big thing here is making sure your bubble placements are relatively together. So you see we are grouped up here. I'm going to drop the bubbles, and I'm going to move, to this next pillar, basically go pillar to pillar. We can use this pillar as well to get hit for the shockwave. I don't know if I line it up correctly here. Basically, that helps you don't get knocked as far. And for our comp, we basically have 2 stages to dealing with these oozes. The first like 3, maybe 4 spawn, maybe 3 spawns. The rogue can basically solo himself, Blade Flurry, super powerful in knocking these oozes back. The other thing is Holy Nova, which is, you know, uncapped. Blade Flurry obviously is capped at, I believe, like 8 or something like that. But once you actually get to too many oozes to deal with for the rogue, you can start throwing in things like Holy Nova to actually help push them back. That's uncapped. There's a few other specs that are very, very good at dealing with these oozes. I don't know off the top of my head. Frost Mage, I think, is pretty good at dealing with it. But basically, if you have one of the like 5-ish specs that are really, really good at dealing with these oozes like we do, it's not really a big deal. And so just make sure that, again, baiting these bubbling fissures is a big deal. So we call out baits, we move, and we move to the next pillar basically for the shockwave, give the rogue some space to deal with them. And it's just kind of a rinse and repeat from there. We go around the room in a circle, constantly baiting fissures, staying away while the rogue solos or the rogue and the priest are soloing. And you know, as a paladin, I'll occasionally help as well, throwing out hammers and Avenger's Shield and stuff like that to actually deal with it. These are going to come up on us, which is why we stay here. And we're going to bait the next bubbling here. Just so, again, these stay relatively close together, relatively like lined up a little bit. It's going to be a bit weird for the next one, but it's not the end of the world. We didn't quite get on the pillar as well for that AoE. But in general, again, the AoE is not super scary. We're going to rotate through CDs. You can see we've been rotating through Zephyr, been rotating through Scales, Mass Barrier, that kind of thing, just so we have a defensive coverage here. And as a tank here, you are worried when the Crushing Claw does go out. It's a big physical damage amp, so his autos are going to start trucking you after that. So just make sure you have coverage for the actual duration of that debuff. The hit itself is not the scariest. It's actually the autos after the hit. And in this case too here, this is pretty scary because you also, this debuff is about to go out. I still have the dot on me, and he's also going to be trucking you. So I had Sentinel up running here, and I used my Farok Trinket to deal with that. So this is kind of the last phase where the rogue is like has an easy time soloing, but boss is almost dead even without Bloodlust here. It's not a super long fight, so we're doing okay here, and then we can finish off the boss. We use a barrier as well for one of the AoEs there, and just rotating through our defensives. Everyone's favorite. Oh yes. For some reason, we decided we were going to race to get down, and they were convinced that jumping was faster, which I guess it is if you just hit the ground and die. But yeah, so note, if you do have a way to not die at the bottom, you can actually jump off, and it's faster than using the teleporter. But yeah, make sure you do use something. And then we're going into a pull here. Okay, so we're pulling Double Watcher into one seer and these minions, and the goal here is we're actually going to want to AoE down and focus the seer, not the watchers, because we're then going to chain the 2 watchers into the next seer pack as well. The other thing, yeah, watch his shadow smashes. The other thing though is you really kind of want to do stops on the psionic pulses. So we're going to rotate through. We have DB going, you know, Evoker knocks, you know, fears, all that good stuff. Individual stops as well on these minions, just to make it so they don't get too many casts off, because especially on fortified keys, you are going to be overrun with damage if you just let all these guys free cast psionic pulse. It hurts. It hurts for sure. And again, once they start dying, I chain to the next pack here. You just keep the cleave going, and we are going to fully kill this pack before we actually chain to the next one. That guy's going to get sanguined up, of course, because we love sanguine. But we finish them up basically, and then we're going to do another similar pull where we do double seer, double watcher. We kill the seers, and then we chain the double watchers into all the squids after. So just a 2-part pull here, and just making sure we have kicks assigned to them. Basically holding on to our AoE stops to deal with the actual squids afterwards. Be careful those silence beams, right? Like some of them with the, you know, the terrain are basically invisible, and then you have ones like that which are completely clear, but you know you can get gripped into. It's storming week right now. You can get stormed into them. Be careful. You can get gripped and then stormed up and then get eaten by the AoE. It's not good. Be careful. But yeah, basically their seers are dead, and now we're chaining into the actual squid guys at the end of the room here. And again, chaining our AoE stops on them as best we can. I think we actually mess up our chain here a little bit. I think we actually might lose our priest. Yeah, but we recover fine. And then we get to this boss. You can see here, we lusted on CD, and we still have 30 seconds on lust coming into this boss fight. So again, if you tried to hold that lust for a minute and a half to try and get a good lust onto the second boss, which wasn't even that difficult for us, as you saw in that video, it's just kind of like you're just kind of inting yourself here, because you then wouldn't get to lust P1 of this boss, which is what you really want to lust. So what you're basically doing is sacrificing the value of your second lust to ensure that your third lust is the most value lust in the entire dungeon. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to get a lust, you know, maybe 10, 15 seconds into the pull. That's perfectly fine. And this is probably one of the 2 hardest bosses as a tank in this season. I would say this boss, and I would say the final boss of Rise, so Deus. 2 hardest bosses by far, I think, for tanks. It's a lot of damage. This is basically all in autos. I think he does some extra nature damage when the totems are up, but it's like heavily auto attack damage because he attacks so fast, just does some bonus nature damage. So you're going to see here, I basically stacked up an empowered consecrate, and then it's just a very overlapped defensive CD every single totem. So they're 25 seconds apart, and you need a good 10 seconds of coverage every single time a totem goes out. So for this first one, as an example, saved up my 5 stacked empowered consecrate, dropped it right on top of the totem to help kill it too, because again, DPS are always going to be focusing totems. It's very important. Totems die quickly. And I'm going to have a sentinel rolling here, and I think this one dies quick enough that I'm able to not do anything, because again, we're in Bloodlust on pull, PI, all cooldowns, so I get to commit a little less to these earlier ones to make me feel safer later on when those cooldowns are done. And this Bloodlust is going to last now into the second totem, so that's why, again, super value Bloodlust. If you delay it like 10 seconds into the pull, you get 2 full totems in a Bloodlust. It makes it nice and easy. Again though, 5 stacked up Consecrate. And I popped my Erunak Trinket as well. So that's what that was. 5 stack Consecrate and Erunak Trinket. Same time, by the way, if you want to talk about what everyone else is dealing with, the Flame Shocks. There is a neat site. Actually, let me pull it up. Here it is. So it's not-even-close.versal.app, which basically shows one-shots here. So what are we at? We're at 26 Tyrannical. And you're looking at Throne of the Tides. It shows like that Acid Barrage I was talking about at the beginning, the Focus Tempest. The Flame Shock on this boss, right? You can kind of click what you have and don't have in terms of group buffs. And you can see, okay, how much damage am I going to take? How much am I going to live? And how much am I going to live by? Am I going to live a tick from it? That kind of thing. Very useful. Kind of shows you how you need to, you know, scale out your defenses. Like obviously we have, we have Atrophic Poison. We've got Fort, Devo, Black Attunement, Master Poisoner, and whatever your stamina is. So, you know, we have a decent amount of defensive usage in our group, but this is really nice to see one-shots, particularly on Tyrannical Week, but also some Trasher in here for Fort Week. But basically, the rest of the raid is dealing with that, and you can't dispel every single one, so occasionally what will happen is our healer will call, okay, hey, no dispel this one, so they either need to dwarf, if they're a dwarf, which our rogue and our mage are, or if it goes on the evoker or our priest, then they need to either defensive or get an external like pain suppression to help them survive it. But that's basically called out. The healer will say, hey, can't dispel the next one. And that's when you know big personals or dwarves need to be used, and that's what they're basically rotating through. And of course, the healer wants to make sure they're topped before the next cast, which is like every 6 seconds. It varies, right? Sometimes he'll go longer periods without casting one, but I think 6-7 seconds, he'll do like 2 or 3 in a row. This one, I end up bubble taunting this one, and it does die mostly in the bubble taunt. Yeah, it's good. And then I have Sentinel back. So, Sentinel's another really powerful one to use. I'm just rotating through CDs. And the big thing is once you start getting close to the push of 25%, you can basically say, hey, just hit the boss. Because as soon as the boss hits 25%, he actually deletes his own totem as well. I wonder if we actually do call for a skip here. Oh, we're definitely going to call. Okay, so we're definitely not going to hit this totem, I think. And we're just going to hit boss. Yeah, we're just hitting boss here. Went to the totem for some cleave, but as soon as the boss is 25, totem despawns, so you're good. Relatively close to this pillar here as well, just so we all have somewhere to run. And you can use these like lamp posts at the front, though it can be a little finicky with like volcanic or storming, because you can get knocked up over the LOS spot and be in line of sight, which is not good. But otherwise, this phase is definitely a lot easier than the first phase. So That's that boss. We're going to go through here. We're going to shroud past these guys. This pack is insanely lethal on higher fortified keys because these throw spears will deal like 80-90% of your people's like clothy's health, that kind of thing. So Tyrant weak, it's not a big deal. We can probably do it, but we skip it anyways. We go sentry here into some aqua mages. Just group everything up. Try not to AoE too hard because there are like 4 corruptions here. I think we're just gonna do it because it's Tyrant week, but ideally you would not kill those before this swell is done, and you would kill them after the swell, that kind of thing. The main goal here is stops on throw spear. It's okay if the occasional one goes off. Obviously, no aqua mages you want to go off. If throw spear ever picks the same target twice, that person's dead. Or if it picks someone like during swell without a CD up, that person's dead. Like the evoker took a big hit here. So we're being a little lazy with our stops because it's Tyrant week. But on Fort week, you definitely want to make sure those are not going off and use like longer term CCs like Hodge and Kidney to deal with that. Pulling up this guy. Gentle AoEing on these guys. So again, we want to try and make sure we don't kill the bulk of these until Swell's done. I think we're going to have like maybe 1 or 2 stacks here, but Swell's done now and we can kill the rest of them. And then this debuff will, hopefully the goal is that it expires before you take any other ticks. 5 seconds before cast starts, 2 extra seconds on our debuff. He's going to channel up. We might take 1 tick here. Yeah, we took 1 tick there. Not the end of the world. We're not going to be pulling a sentry in the next pack. Alternatively, on Tyrant week, sometimes Fort week as well, some people will pull the sentry through onto the 6-pack of casters. Depends on timing. If you're down bad for time on a Tyrant week, you can do that. I don't think I would ever recommend it on a fortified week. I think it's too risky. So don't do that. Notably, for this pack, I am going to walk in first as a tank just to make sure they're all targeting me. I just pop some big defensives, boom, I get hit, but it saves us a round of AoE stops, saves us some time basically. And then we're just going through AoE stops, using kicks as needed as we run out, knock-ups, everything we can to make sure none of these Aqua Blasts actually go off here. Yes, we use a knock on Sanguine, which ends up chaining us. So this is going to get a little fun here. Drop the barrier down to help with this first set of swells going off because we are going to have a bunch of stacks here. Externals, we're disease dispelling as well. We do lose 1 player. I think it's not the end of the world here. Trying to get out of this Sanguine just gets a little bit chaotic because of Sanguine and that initial knock, but we do end up recovering just fine here. Trying to finish off these last Aqua Mages, I think, before the actual everything kills us, and we do barely recover. And then I think we can battle res our evoker at this point when we're all recovered and everything's good. Nothing bad happened at all. A couple deaths, but we're okay. We do also split damage here on these guys just for effective cleave, because again we have 2 prio target classes, so they're each prioing a different ad just to maximize effective damage on the on that pull in general. And then we go straight into the Ink of Ozumat here. We're still 3 minutes down on lust, so actually I don't even know if we get our 4th lust on this key level. We would like a key level up or 2, but on a 26 we aren't able to actually get it. That's fine, that's not the end of the world. Honestly, this is probably one of the easier bosses of the dungeon here. It's not a ton to it. Relatively close on your blotting barrages. Make sure you are cleaning those fully with the cleansing flux. Make sure every single puddle is gone. That's what's going to run you into trouble. I think we actually, like, later in the fight we miss a puddle and we start running out of space. And as a tank, I move back always for these ads, group them all up, try and drop all the sludge puddles in one spot, again getting range kicks to bring splotches in, and then I'll rotate away from the group to take the frontal away from them so they have space to spread around these existing puddles with their debuffs, and just kind of rinse and repeat from there. There's really not a ton to this boss fight. This frontal doesn't really hit that hard either, right? I'm in Sentinel, it's fine. I probably could have popped way more. I have so much stuff, I just don't use it. We cleared everything, group up all the ads again into one spot, rinse and repeat from there. Is really not a ton. They spread around those. I move to the opposite side, etc., etc. That is really it for this boss and this dungeon, Throne of the Tides. Hopefully this helps you guys out. If it did, make sure you subscribe for more content like it. Like I said, more content coming in season 4 of Dragonflight, more content coming in the War Within. So make sure you guys do turn on notifications so you know when that gets posted. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream all my push keys, and I do mythic raiding as well, and much more. As always, I got to shout out my amazing Patreon supporters. I appreciate each and every one of you. Otherwise, thanks everyone else so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.